I've been using an iPad Pro since the beginning of this year, I would say, and I have loved so many things about it. It's been my travel companion for when I need to get work done on the go, and it's so thin that it becomes too easy to travel with. However, the iPad Air 4, or the iPad Air 2020, came out recently and piqued my interest considering how much it looks like a 2018 iPad Pro, which is exactly the one I have. So today I've got a full review ready and I've got a lot of praise for it and some disappointments at the same time. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Before we continue, I just want to remind you that we have a Twitch channel where we stream every Friday and Saturday from 8 p.m. and to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, so why not go ahead and drop a follow? And also don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and also make sure to check out the merch store. There's plenty of black and white sweetness to choose from up there, so go ahead and check that out. And then make sure to take a look at the podcast as well, as the podcast always goes live every Wednesday and Sunday. And with that said, enough rambling, let us get straight into the video. And as always, let's begin with an unboxing. So first off, just go ahead and lift up the little tab that you're going to find on the corner to peel off the entire plastic wrapping, and then you can go ahead and lift up the lid to find the iPad Air in its plastic wrapping. Undo that, and you'll be holding the tablet in its full glory. Now beyond that, there is going to be a little container with instructions, stickers, and more, but beyond that, you will find a USB-C power brick and a USB-C cable. As always, this was a beautiful unboxing coming from Apple. The exterior design consists of aluminum and glass on the front. This iPad looks almost identical to the 2018 iPad Pro, from the quad speakers to the USB-C placement and the magnetic latch for the Apple Pencil to the single camera module and thickness. You could fool me easily, but there are some visual differences that are actually minor. For example, we do have a slightly bigger sleep-wake button, which is also there for Touch ID in order to cover enough ground to fit most finger sizes, I would say. And this is what we do get instead of Face ID, by the way. I like how we do on the iPad Pro, since we do have Face ID there, but we don't have Touch ID. And the bezels are also a little bit thicker than the ones on the Pro models, and that is easier to notice than the whole addition of Touch ID for sure. But let me be clear, I'm glad that they made these changes to the iPad Air, and I think it looks beautiful, following a great trend for sure. And not to mention that it comes in a bunch of different colors that just give you so many options for what look you want to go for. In this case, I just got the rose gold one. Now this iPad features a liquid retina IPS display, more specifically a 10.9-inch 1640 by 2360 resolution display that does still run at around 60 Hz, and this wasn't even really immediately obvious until I put it right next to my iPad Pro and noticed the difference right there. That's not to say that the iPad Air feels sluggish because of it. In fact, it still feels very smooth to use for just about any task, and watching videos on this is a total joy. Thanks to the high resolution panel, you do get a great viewer experience, and even with the lower quality panel, you also still get a great drawing experience too, and I'm sure that a lot of people will be getting this iPad for drawing in particular. They didn't cheap out so much with this display, not as much as you might think, and this is a great upgrade from the previous Air already. This iPad features a quad speaker setup with 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. After some listening with content on YouTube, I discerned that they sound pretty damn good. Have a listen.
Is it still in the realm of like just overpriced for what's inside?
I wouldn't say that it is necessarily overpriced for what's inside. It's just, right now, it's really just beta testing a product, because the internals aren't going to be compatible with absolutely everything that you come across, even if it is compatible with macOS. So recently, I reviewed the Razer Siren Mini microphone and was very impressed with it. In fact, I gave it a glowing review for being so affordable while still sounding so good. And while that was a condenser mic, that being the case for the vast majority of USB microphones, but I haven't really had the chance to test out one of Razer's most premium offerings until now, and I finally have a point of comparison right here.
This iPad features an Apple A14 Bionic CPU, which is a 6-core CPU, 4 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of storage at the base, which is what I have here, a 1640 by 2360 1080 resolution display, about 10 hours of battery life, a 12 megapixel 4K 60 rear facing camera, and a 7 megapixel 1080p 60 front facing camera. And speaking of the cameras, they are pretty good. I'm talking about both the rear and the front cameras at the same time since it is a tablet. I won't take too much time in this section. They both offer nice sharp pictures and video, and the front facing camera is great for phone calls if you're doing Zoom calls or I suppose FaceTime calls and things like that. It is pretty good, and also for taking quick pictures too. Nothing too special here, but pretty good overall, honestly. Now, gaming performance is exactly what I expected, and it is pretty good. With a game like Asphalt 9, its performance was smooth, as the game did run at 60 frames per second. The gaming experience is quite nice due in part to the beautiful display, of course, and the powerful speakers, but if you're looking to game on the iPad Air, I think you will have a pretty good experience no matter what. And that was when we get a little bit more detailed when it comes to productivity software, which means that we will be taking the Apple Pencil into account as well. Affinity Photo is my preferred photo editor on the iPad. It's very smooth for sure, and it offers a lot of tools for working with images and getting some nice work done as well. And I mean professional level, and depending on how skilled you are with the software. I'm still getting used to it, of course. There's still a lot about it that I haven't learned, and my photo edits tend to be pretty simple, of course. The Apple Pencil does help quite a lot in getting more precise with fine-tune adjustments. Honestly, this was awesome. I never thought that I would feel this comfortable editing pictures on a $600 device, and this is fantastic. It's got a fantastic display too that honestly helps quite a lot. $600 for this kind of experience is honestly pretty cheap. And then Procreate was one piece of software that honestly didn't feel like it was affected all that much from the lack of a higher refresh rate panel. It still felt very smooth, and I was very comfortable drawing using Procreate. I don't feel held back at all like I thought that I was going to be. So if you want the iPad Air for drawing and photo editing, you've got my blessing, because you're going to have a pretty great experience for sure. As we saw with Affinity Photo, for instance. The precision of the Apple Pencil here is great, and palm rejection is still working quite well over here. Even though it's not perfect, it is still pretty decent, I would say, at the very least. The Apple Pencil can get very precise with fine line work and shading, which is actually pretty cool. It takes a bit of practice, of course, but it is a great combination to use in tandem. And now here comes the most intensive piece of software. This is going to be LumaFusion. I edited a video using only 4K clips and some transitions with very minor color work and audio work. This is where the lack of a 20Hz panel actually became more noticeable. Working on the software didn't feel quite as smooth, but it was still very smooth. Like, don't get me wrong, performance was still great on this tablet. I can edit videos in 4K just fine on the iPad Air, almost regardless of what I add in it. My edits aren't really too complicated either, but still can be intensive at times, and 4K is typically difficult to handle, but this iPad handles the footage with so much ease. I honestly really loved it. As a cheap way of being able to edit your YouTube videos, I would recommend LumaFusion and the iPad Air instead of a laptop at around this price range. And now let's talk about battery life, which is also very good here. You can get up to 10 hours, but depending on what you're doing, that can significantly affect battery life, especially if you're gaming or editing videos on this device. For the most part, really, I get around 6 hours-ish of battery life, since I do tend to use it for long periods of time, but do keep that in mind. This is still a great deal in my opinion. I do, however, have some complaints about the iPad Air. I believe that we should have gotten at least a 90Hz panel, as 60Hz is still good. In fact, it's standard, so it's definitely acceptable. It should have had a higher refresh rate though, without necessarily beating out the iPad Pro in terms of value by staying lower than 120Hz, which is what the iPad Pro runs at. But they stuck with 60Hz, which is kind of meh. But for the more budget iPad, I would have also hoped for a headphone jack, since this is a device that is big enough to support it, in my opinion. Again, it feels like an unnecessary exclusion, just like on the iPad Pro, for instance. So in conclusion, I'm pretty happy recommending the iPad Air over the iPad Pro if you're on a budget. Apple's accessories are pretty expensive, and even though there are third-party solutions out there, if you're looking to do work on this tablet, then I would not cheap out on third-party accessories. This is especially true when it comes to getting a keyboard cover that happens to have a trackpad on it, but the iPad Air is very powerful as is for what it is, and it definitely feels like a slightly watered down iPad Pro, but just slightly. by things that the regular user honestly would not notice. It's beautifully designed for sure, with a great display and powerful specs, with great battery life, and works with pretty much every iPad Pro accessory out there. Strongly recommended if you're on a budget and don't care for the 2020 Pro's cameras. Honestly, I don't. This is the way to go, and the one that I would recommend to students for sure, and artists for that matter. Now, do keep an eye out for a full comparison with the iPad Pro in the future, and I'll also be talking about the best Pro apps to use with the iPad Air, so do subscribe for when that comes out very, very soon. And if you're interested in purchasing the iPad Air, then I'll be making sure to leave affiliate links down to my Amazon in the description. And I'm also going to be leaving links to Lester in case you needed a little bit of help looking for sales on something like the iPad Air or tablet. And it also gives you a bunch of recommendations as well, and like within that category too, if that is something that you're looking for or something that you do need a little bit of help with. And also you can use Abunda. Abunda is going to be a pretty cool service that essentially makes it so that you can finance and just pay for whatever item you want over time, and in this case the iPad Air, instead of having to pay for it outright, and you don't need your own credit card for that. So don't worry about it. It is a pretty cool service. I'm going to be leaving links to all of that down below. If you do use any of my links, I get a small commission that does help the channel out quite a bit. And also do make sure to stop by the Tech Summit podcast that does go live every week now. With that said, we do talk a lot about tech, and we would love to see you over there. So links to that down below. And you can also find me on Twitch, as I stream every Friday and Saturday from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern time. I like to stream some games and answer some questions. But you can also find the rest of my social media, like my Instagram and my Twitter. This has been Francisco from Tech Summit. Thank you so much for watching, and I will be seeing you all later. Enjoy.